On June 26, 2026, Britain's climate past and its climate future collided in a place most people have never heard of. Lingwood, a quiet corner of Norfolk. At Strumpshaw Hill, a Met Office sensor registered a temperature of 37.7 degrees Celsius. It didn't just break the previous record for the hottest June day, it obliterated it, annihilated it by an astonishing 2.1 degrees. That is not how records fall. They creep up by tenths of a degree. A margin like this is a rupture, a sign that the system itself is breaking. And this wasn't a freak event, it was a punctuation mark. Just weeks later, on July 9th, the UK officially recorded its 8th day of the year at or above 34 degrees Celsius. The old annual record was 7. A record set in the legendary blistering summer of 1976. That benchmark, which stood for half a century, was just erased. In the middle of July. This isn't about a fondness for sunny weather anymore. This is a story about a country built for one climate, now waking up inside a completely different one. An infrastructure designed to trap heat is now becoming a weapon. A national identity built on green landscapes and gentle rain is now confronting a future of drought and fire. The very houses people live in, the hospitals they depend on, the railways that connect them, none of it was built for this. So the real question isn't whether Britain is getting hotter. The question is, has the country woken up to the fact that its buildings, its water supply, and its own physiology are about to fail? The most dangerous part of Britain's new summer doesn't arrive in the blaze of the afternoon sun. It creeps in after dusk. It is silent, suffocating, and it prevents the country from sleeping. They are called tropical nights. The official definition is a night where the temperature never drops below 20 degrees Celsius. For the human body, it is a disaster. Daytime heat puts the entire cardiovascular system under immense stress. The heart works harder. Blood vessels dilate. The body desperately tries to cool its core. Night is supposed to be the period of recovery, the moment the system can reset, repair, and regulate. Tropical nights erase that recovery. When the air outside your window stays at 21, 22, 23 degrees, your body simply cannot offload its thermal burden. The heart keeps pumping harder. The stress accumulates. For the elderly, for those with pre-existing conditions, for anyone living in poorly ventilated housing, it can be lethal. The UK Health Security Agency knows this. Their head of extreme events, Dr. Agostinho Sousa, tracks the data with grim precision. They see mortality spikes begin to register within 24 hours of a heat wave's onset, not from the peak temperature, from the sustained, inescapable heat that follows everyone indoors. On June 25th, 2026, at Cardiff Butte Park in Wales, the temperature refused to fall. All night long, it hovered. It stuck. The official overnight minimum was a sweltering 23.5 degrees Celsius, a new record for the highest June overnight temperature in UK history. Think about that. Not the daytime high, the low. 23.5 degrees. In a country where millions of homes have no air conditioning, where buildings are insulated to keep heat in. It is the perfect formula for turning a bedroom into an oven. The science on this is terrifyingly clear. In the pre-industrial climate, the annual probability of experiencing 3 consecutive tropical nights in July was less than 1%. A statistical ghost. Today, as of 2026, that probability is 20%. A 1 in 5 chance every single year. A risk that was once theoretical is now a recurring feature of the British summer. We are not adapted for this. Our bodies aren't. Our buildings aren't. And the result is a massive nationwide sleep deprivation event, coupled with a surge in cardiovascular stress that is killing people in their own homes. A silent, invisible killer that arrives under the cover of darkness. The central paradox of Britain's heat crisis is written in brick and mortar. For decades, for centuries, the primary challenge of British architecture was keeping the cold out. Thick walls, insulated lofts, double-glazed windows. Every feature was designed to capture and retain as much warmth as possible to survive long, damp, chilly winters. It worked. It kept people safe. Now, that same design philosophy is turning homes into death traps. Those same insulated walls that hold in the warmth from a radiator in January now trap the solar gain from a relentless July sun. The double-glazed windows that stop heat from escaping now stop cooler night air from getting in. This isn't a metaphor, it is physics. The very infrastructure that was a symbol of comfort has become an agent of thermal stress. Emma Howard Boyd, the former chair of the Environment Agency and now head of the new National Heat Risk Commission, put it in the starkest possible terms. She called these deaths a failure of our built environment to protect the most vulnerable. In cities, this failure is amplified. It has a name: the urban heat island effect. Concrete, asphalt, and dark roofing materials absorb and hold solar radiation far more effectively than natural landscapes. At night, a city center can remain several degrees warmer than the surrounding countryside, creating the very conditions for those deadly tropical nights. It is, as Howard Boyd noted, the urban heat island effect in its most literal and tragic form. The city itself is generating the heat that harms its inhabitants. This problem is not new, but its scale is. The record-breaking heat of July 19, 2022, when Coningsby in Lincolnshire hit 40.3 degrees Celsius, the first time 40°C had ever been recorded in the UK, was a warning shot. That summer, an estimated 2,985 people died from heat-associated causes in England alone. The system was overwhelmed. Hospitals struggled. Ambulance services were stretched to their breaking point. The rail network buckled, with tracks warping in the unprecedented heat. It was a glimpse into a future that planners had modeled, but the public had never truly felt. In response, the government is scrambling to catch up. The Climate Change Committee published a report on May 20th, 2026, titled A Well-Adapted UK. The language was not gentle. It cited heat, flooding, and drought as extreme structural risks, demanding urgent investment in national adaptation. Just one day later, a House of Lords committee issued its own dire warning. The system is reacting. But is it reacting fast enough? Are new building regulations for ventilation and shading moving from advisory papers to ironclad law? Are there enough public cooling centers, as climate scientist Dr. Chloe Brimacombe has advocated for years? Because right now, millions are living in houses designed for a different planet. A planet that is rapidly disappearing in the rearview mirror. The summer of 2025 should have been a catastrophe. It was, according to the Met Office, the warmest UK summer on record, with a mean temperature of 16.1 degrees Celsius. The models, built on the brutal experience of 2022, predicted a devastating death toll. They projected more than 3,000 heat-associated deaths, a number that would have represented a profound public health disaster. But that is not what happened. The final data from the UK Health Security Agency was genuinely shocking. The total number of heat-associated deaths in England during that record-breaking summer was 1,504. A terrible number, a tragedy for every family involved. But it was also 1,535 fewer deaths than the models had anticipated. Half. The death toll was cut in half. So what changed? How can the hottest summer on record produce half the mortality of a slightly cooler one? The answer is not in the weather. It's in the behavior. For the first time, the warnings landed. The heat health alerts issued by the UKSA and the Met Office were not just background noise. They were triggers for action. Local authorities, care homes, and NHS trusts implemented their heatwave plans earlier and more aggressively. The public, scarred by the memory of 2022, listened. People checked on vulnerable neighbors. They stayed hydrated. They sought out cooler spaces. They altered their daily routines to avoid the worst of the afternoon heat. It was the first large-scale proof of a concept that adaptation experts have been preaching for years, that while we cannot stop the heat wave, we can drastically reduce its harm. The 2025 survival anomaly is a sliver of hope in an otherwise darkening forecast. It proves that preventative action works, that communication saves lives, that community resilience is not just a buzzword, it is a measurable, life-preserving force. And yet, you can't outrun physics forever. The summer of 2024, which felt cool by comparison, still saw 1,311 heat-related deaths, showing that even a mild summer in our new climate is more dangerous than a severe one from the old. The The baseline has shifted. The very definition of a safe temperature is being rewritten. The success of 2025 proved that Britain could cope with a crisis it was prepared for. It bought time. But here's what they didn't tell you. While the country was celebrating its resilience to heat, a different, slower, and perhaps even more fundamental crisis was tightening its grip. The country was starting to run out of water. There is a profound, almost comical disconnect at the heart of the British psyche. A country defined by its rainfall, its green and pleasant land, its perpetual drizzle, and a country that is, right now, walking headfirst into a structural water crisis of catastrophic proportions. The numbers are not ambiguous. They are terrifying. According to a landmark report from the House of Lords Committee, chaired by Baroness Sheehan, England faces a projected water shortfall of 5 billion litres per day by the year 2055. 5 billion litres per day. It is a number so large, it loses meaning. So let's put it in terms that mean something. That is the equivalent of 2,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools worth of water vanishing from the system every single day. This isn't a prediction about a single dry summer. This is a structural deficit, a gap between the water the country has and the water the country needs, and it's driven by a perfect storm of factors. Climate breakdown is making rainfall patterns more extreme, longer dry spells. More intense but shorter downpours that run off the land before they can replenish aquifers. Population growth adds millions of new taps to the network. And then there's the demand, the relentless, often invisible thirst of a modern economy. It is a crisis of perception. A 2026 survey revealed a staggering gap between belief and reality. The British public estimates their personal daily water use is around 30 litres. The actual figure? 140 litres, nearly 5 times higher. Every flush of a toilet, every load of laundry, every dishwasher cycle. It adds up to a level of consumption that the public simply cannot see and the environment can no longer sustain. This summer, in July of 2026, that slow-burning crisis has caught fire. Millions of customers are facing hosepipe bans. The sight of brown, parched parks and gardens in a nation that fetishizes its green lawns is a visual shock. But it's only a symptom of a much deeper problem. The Environment Agency is coordinating drought responses. Reservoirs that were healthy after a wet winter are now dropping at an alarming rate, and Baroness Sheehan warns that the public will not take it seriously. Not while they see a hypocritical system at work. As she put it, messages on water conservation will ring hollow if people see their local water companies leaking millions of litres. It is a crisis of infrastructure as much as a crisis of climate. A system of Victorian pipes leaking a staggering percentage of the very resource it is meant to protect. A booming city, a shrinking supply. It's the same math problem that faces Las Vegas or Phoenix, but it's happening here, in England. And the country is not prepared for the consequences. The social contract is simple, you turn on the tap and water comes out. But for the first time in modern British history, that promise is beginning to fracture. In the midst of this escalating crisis of heat and thirst, a new, almost sci-fi element has emerged. A conflict between human survival and artificial intelligence. Dr. Chloe Brimacombe, a climate scientist at the University of Oxford, flagged a grim paradox. During Britain's recent heat waves, where are vast amounts of energy and our dwindling water supply being diverted to cooling massive, power-hungry data centers? The engines of the digital age. Her question was as simple as it was damning. Lives are more valuable to us than AI, or at least they should be, right? It peels back a layer on the complexity of this new world. While elderly residents swelter in social housing without basic air conditioning, billions of gallons and megawatts of power are being used to keep servers from overheating. These data centers, which process everything from our social media feeds to complex AI models, are incredibly thirsty. They require constant cooling, often using water-intensive evaporative cooling systems, placing a direct and escalating demand on the same stressed water supply that households depend on. It is a hidden drain, a demand that most people never see, for a service they use every day. and it creates a brutal competition for resources. Every liter of water used to cool a server farm is a liter that cannot be used to irrigate a crop, fill a reservoir, or flow from a family's tap. This isn't a distant future problem. It's happening now. During the July 2026 heatwave, as hosepipe bans spread, these vast anonymous buildings were humming along, consuming a resource that was being rationed for the public. This paradox highlights a profound disconnect in policy and priorities. The UK is racing to become a world leader in AI technology, a laudable goal for economic growth. But it is doing so on a geographic footprint that is increasingly unable to support the fundamental resource requirements of that technology. The National Heat Risk Commission, established in March 2026, is tasked with providing strategic advice on heat vulnerability. But does its mandate include the systemic risk posed by the energy and water demands of big tech? Or are these issues being treated in separate silos, blind to the way they compound one another? Dr. Brimacombe's quote forces an uncomfortable confrontation with our own values. In a world of finite resources, what do we choose to save first? The infrastructure of our digital lives, or the human beings gasping for air in an overheated council flat? The crisis is no longer just about the weather. It is about a series of choices. Choices about infrastructure, about technology, and about who and what we prioritize when the heat is on and the taps run dry. The answer to that question will define the character of the nation in the decades to come. There is a phrase that has crept into our conversations about the climate, a phrase that offers a strange, misplaced comfort, the new normal. We hear it after every record-breaking flood, every unprecedented wildfire, every scorching heat wave. It suggests that we have arrived at a new, stable plateau. A difficult plateau, perhaps, but one we can adjust to. Professor Friederike Otto, a climate scientist at Imperial College London, has a stark warning. The phrase is a lie. The climate we have today is not stable, she states, and it is misleading to talk about a new normal. Her point is critical. What we are experiencing is not a destination. It is a trajectory. The heat records of 2026 are not the new baseline. They are simply the latest data point on an upward climbing line. A line whose steepness is tied directly, irrefutably, to the amount of fossil fuels we continue to burn. Think back to July 19th, 2022, the day Britain hit 40.3 degrees. At the time, it felt like a science fiction event, a temperature from a different continent, appearing in a quiet corner of Lincolnshire. Climate models suggested such an event should be exceptionally rare, but Professor Otto's work, part of the field of attribution science, has shown with chilling clarity that these events are no longer rare. The heat we saw in the summer of 2022, she explains, was only possible because of the 1.4 C of climate change we have to date. For every fraction of a degree the world warms, the probability and intensity of these extreme heat events increases. The 37.7 C recorded in Norfolk in June 2026 wasn't a freak occurrence that resets the clock. It was the logical, predictable next step. And there will be another step after that. The term new normal is dangerous because it encourages complacency. It suggests we can build our new seawalls, install our air conditioners, and be done with it. But we are trying to adapt to a target that is constantly moving, and moving faster every year. This is the reality that governments and institutions are now wrestling with. The UK's entire national infrastructure, its railways, its power grid, its hospitals, its water network, was designed based on historical climate data that is now functionally obsolete. The engineering tolerances, the stress test scenarios, the 1 in 100-year event planning. It's all based on a world that no longer exists. The projected cost of failing to adapt is staggering. The Climate Change Committee estimates that by 2050, the annual hit to public welfare could be between 60 billion and 260 billion pounds. That is between 1 and 5% of the UK's entire GDP. Lost productivity from overheating, damage to infrastructure, strain on the health service. The costs are not theoretical. They are invoices that are already starting to arrive. So when we see a new temperature record fall, it's not time to update the almanac and call it the new normal. It is a moment to understand that we are in a period of active, accelerating destabilization. Professor Otto's warning is the most important one of all. There is no normal to get used to. Not yet. There is only the climb, and the terrifying, unanswered question of how high it will go. Britain is a country haunted by its own climate identity. The image is baked into the national soul. A gentle, persistent rain soaking rolling green hills. A cup of tea on a gray afternoon. The relief of a cool breeze after a mild summer's day. That Britain is not gone. Not yet. But it now shares its existence with another country. A country of cracked earth and parched reservoirs. A country of sleepless, tropical nights and ambulance sirens cutting through the suffocating heat. These two versions of Britain now exist side by side, locked in a struggle for the future. The infrastructure built for the old Britain is now failing the new one. The houses meant to be cozy sanctuaries are becoming kilns. The water system, predicated on reliable rainfall, is facing a deficit measured in billions of liters a day. The very success of the past has become the vulnerability of the present. And yet, this is not a story of inevitable doom. It is a story of choice. The 2025 survival anomaly proved that. It showed that when warnings are heeded, when communities act, when policy is driven by evidence, lives can be saved. It demonstrated that resilience is a verb, an action, not a passive state. We have the knowledge. We have the data. The work of scientists like Dr. Brimacombe and Professor Otto. The warnings from bodies like the Climate Change Committee. The grim statistics from the UXA. They have drawn the map of the crisis with painstaking precision. We know what is happening. We know why. The question is a battle of speed. Can a nation's institutions, its industries, and its culture adapt faster than the climate itself unravels? Can we retrofit our homes, rethink our water use, and re-engineer our cities before the next even more brutal heat wave arrives? Can we confront the uncomfortable truth that a high-tech economy has a primitive thirst that our island can no longer quench? The summer of 2026 is not an ending. It is a beginning. The beginning of a new chapter in the nation's history. One where the weather is no longer a topic for polite small talk, but a matter of life and death. The records broken this year will be broken again. The hosepipe bans will return. The silent human cost of the heat will continue to mount, night after sleepless night. Britain made it through this summer. But somewhere on a government risk register,